They say power corrupts, but what happens when the person you're trying to intimidate isn't afraid? What happens when the victim turns the tables and takes everything from you? This is the story of Commander Lisa Monroe, a woman who refused to be bullied. A woman who took on an officer drunk with power and walked away victorious. But this victory wasn't just for her, it was for everyone who had ever been forced to stay silent. Let's go back to that night, the night that changed everything. The road stretched ahead, dark and nearly empty. Street lights flickered, casting long shadows over the slick pavement. It was just past 11 p.m., late enough that most people had already settled in for the night. Lisa Monroe had been driving for 2 hours, the steady hum of jazz filling the silence. She was exhausted, ready to get home, and looking forward to nothing more than her bed. But fate had other plans. She saw the flashing red and blue lights in her rearview mirror. Fast, aggressive. Her stomach tightened, not out of fear, but frustration. She knew how these things worked. She had spent years in the Navy, trained to handle high-pressure situations, but still, she wasn't in uniform tonight, just a black sweater and jeans. To this cop, she was just another woman on the road. She pulled over, put the car in park, and kept her hands visible. She had seen too many situations go wrong because of a sudden movement. The patrol car stopped behind her. The officer took his time getting out, his boots scraping against the pavement. He approached, flashlight in hand, shining it right in her eyes. His badge caught the light, Officer Carson. No greeting, no explanation, just license and registration. Lisa stayed calm, handing over her documents. "Was I speeding, officer?" she asked, her voice measured. Carson didn't answer immediately. He gave her a once-over, eyes lingering just a little too long before he spoke. Tail lights out. Lisa frowned. That couldn't be right. She had her car checked just weeks ago. "Are you sure?" Carson's expression darkened. "Are you arguing with me?" And just like that, the air shifted. Lisa had seen this before. A power struggle, a test. She knew she had two choices, comply or question him, but she also knew her rights. "I just had my lights checked," she said, keeping her tone neutral. "But if there's an issue, I'll get it fixed." "Step out of the car." Lisa exhaled slowly. She glanced at the road. No witnesses, no passing cars. The situation was turning. Fast. "Mind telling me why?" she asked. Carson smirked. "Because I said so." She let that sit in the air. Then, with slow, deliberate movements, she unbuckled her seatbelt and stepped out. The night air was cooler than she expected, but her posture remained firm. She wouldn't escalate, but she wouldn't be bullied either. Carson stepped forward, scanning her as if deciding how much he could get away with. "Turn around, hands on the car." This time she hesitated. "For what reason?" Carson's smirk disappeared. "Are you resisting?" Lisa held her ground. "No, I'm asking a question." A flicker of something crossed his face. Annoyance, amusement, maybe both. Then, without warning, he reached for his radio. "Got a non-compliant driver here." Then louder, "Turn around." Her pulse picked up, but she stayed calm. "Officer, I need you to understand something," she said, her voice low but firm. "I know exactly what I'm allowed to do, and I know exactly what you can't do." Carson's jaw clenched. He didn't like that. "You're under arrest." He grabbed her wrist. Lisa moved, just enough to step back. Under arrest for what? Obstructing an officer. And there it was, his game. She had spent years training for moments like this. She knew the law, and more importantly, she knew that Carson was crossing the line, but she also knew she had no backup. She had two options: fight now or fight later. With slow, deliberate movements, she turned and placed her hands on the car. The metal was cool under her palms. Carson wasted no time. He yanked her arms back, cuffing her too tight before shoving her toward his car. "You don't know what you're doing," she murmured. Carson chuckled. Lady, I know exactly what I'm doing. But he didn't, not even close. 3 days later, Lisa walked into the courtroom, but this wasn't the same woman Carson had arrested on the side of the road. This time she wore her full military uniform, ribbons on her chest, a decade of service behind her. The courtroom was packed. Media, lawyers, community leaders, all watching. Lisa's attorney had spent 72 hours gathering every piece of evidence against Carson, every complaint, every report, every victim he had harassed. This wasn't his first time, but it would be his last. Carson's confidence was gone. When he saw her standing before the judge, the smirk finally vanished from his face. He knew. By the end of the hearing, it was over. His badge was stripped, his career was destroyed. And Lisa? She walked out of that courtroom with her head held high, because she hadn't just won for herself. She had won for everyone who had ever been told to stay quiet, to comply, to submit. Not today, not ever again. Respect isn't about a uniform or a badge. It's about character, and when someone tries to take your power, make sure they regret it, because in the end, the truth always wins. And Lisa Monroe, she didn't just win, she made history.